Chapter 31. One morning, in late December, they wake to a smell of seaweed and brine. The wind is sensibly colder. Before it swiftly run grey small clouds, more and less dark. Light, when it arrives, comes ever crosswise. Something wrong with this town this morning, Dixon mutters. And what's that god-awful twittering sound? Styled birds, I'm told. How's it possible we've never heard any here before? Dixon, hold! The hammers, the ripsaws, the meat wagons, the screaming uninterrupted. What's happened? It's been Christmas, hasn't it? One of us, Mason declares, must put on his shoes and coat and go down into that street there and discover the reason for this unsettling silence. So let's have Junior's arse in the roasting pan once again, shall we? That's bonny, protests Dixon. Be practical. If they kill you, and I remain safe, the loss to British astronomy, if any, will go largely unnoticed. Well, put that way, of course. Where's my hat, then? Not that one, thank ye, sir. No, I'll need the broad brim today. You're going out as a Quaker? He has costume advice for me now as well. He, who all too plainly exhibits his need, when in public, ever to deflect attention. Inexpensive salvo, Mason notes. Geordie intuition, then. Dixon tapping his head with the side of his thumb, before putting on a classic Philadelphia Quaker's hat, differing in little but size from thousands of others here in town. Trust mine, in London they may sift you by your shoes, but in this place 'tis hat and wig by which a man, aye, and women too, may infallibly be known. They've been looking at my wig all this time, my hat? Dixon, you're sure? Aye, and forming opinions based upon what they saw as well. What if, for example, what matter? 'Tis much too late. They've all made up their mind about thee by now. Then I'll wear something else. So then they'll be on about that. There he is, look before you leap. He, bold enough to clap on anything as style as the Adonis. No. 'Tis but the tried and true, for old heavens, what'll they think of me? What, my wig, it isn't adventurous enough, you're saying? Attend me, man. Molly and Dolly, remember them? Discuss little but thy appearance, and ways to modify it, at least in my hearing, ruining, alas, and more than once, the promise of a sparkish evening, thy wig in particular provoking one of the greatest, forgive me, of all my failures of attention. It's a Ramillies of the middling sort, bought some years since of a fugitive Irish wig-maker at Bermondsey, styled himself Master Larry, whilst you tarry. Nothing remarkable at all about it. You say that you've been spending time with time and coin and little else. Ah, but that's another tale, is it not? Withal, my reconnaissance mission awaits, and damn, I'm off. And he is, Mason following so closely as nearly to have his nose caught in the jam. Wait, I was going out with ye. Hopping down the stairs into his shoes, attempting to button his jacket. How are you fitting that in, among all the obs and social visits? Fitting what in? Dixon staring in comic dismay down toward his penis, as he has seen marketplace drolls do. The snow this morning is ankle deep, crepitous, with more on the way. The street before the inn seems deserted. Odd for Wednesday market. 'Tis another damned preacher, Mason opines, who's magnetized the whole population away to a tent someplace. You know how they are here. Flock to anything, won't they? Worldly Philadelphians. The nearest coffee house, the Restless Bee, lies but a block and a half distant. There, if any place, should be news up to the minute. On the way over, they begin at last to hear ships' bells and boatswains' pipes from the docks, children out coasting, dogs barking, a teamster with a laden wagon in a snowdrift, and presently, indeed, the crescent drone and susurrus of assembly. Directly in front of the Restless Bee, they come upon a circle of citizens, observing and, in some cases, wagering upon a furious struggle between two men. One, to appearance, a city Quaker, whose hat has been knocked off. The other, an apparent Presbyterian from the back country, dressed in animal hides from head to foot, each having already taken a number of solid blows from the other, neither showing any lapse of pugnacity. "Excuse me, sir," Mason inquires of a gentleman in full wig, velvet coat, and breeches, and carrying a lawyer's bag. "What is the matter here?" The attorney, after staring at them for a bit, introduces himself as Mr. Chantry. "You're from well out of town, and you've not heard the news." "Eh?" Dixon's eyes seeking the zenith. "At Lancaster, day before yesterday, the Indians that were taking refuge in the jail there were massacred every one by local irregulars, the same band that slew the other Indians at Conestoga but week before last. So finishing what they'd begun," contributes an aproned mechanic nearby. "Now the entire tribe is gone, the lot." "Were there no soldiers to prevent it?" Dixon asks. "Colonel Robertson and his regiment of Highlanders refused to stir, toasting their noses whilst that brave Paxton vermin murdered old people, small children, and defenceless drunkards, not being men enough to face warriors in a real fight." "Mind your speech, friend, or 'tis your hat'll be on the ground as well, and your head in it." "And here's to Matt Smith and Reverend Stewart." "Here's death to them, the cowardly dogs." Further insults, then snowballs, fists, and brickbats begin to fly. "This way, gentlemen," Mr. Chantry, helpfully steering the surveyors to the alley and through a back entry into the coffee house, where they find tumult easily outroaring what prevails outside. With its own fuliginous weather, at once public and private, created of smoke billowing from pipes, hearths, and stoves, the room would provide an extraordinary sight were any able to see it. In this combination, peculiar and precise, of unceasing talk and low visibility, that makes riot's indoor sister, conspiracy, not only possible, but resultful as well. One may be inches from a neighbour, yet both blurred past recognizing. Thus may advice grow reckless and prophecy extreme. Given the astonishing volume of words moving about in here, not only aloud, but upon paper as well, paper being waved in the air, poked at repeatedly for emphasis, held up as shielding against uncongenial remarks. Here and there, in the nebulosity, lone lamps may be made out at undefined distances, snugly haloed. Servant boys moving to and fro, house cats and warm currents of flesh running invisibly before them, each boy vigorously working his small bellows to a clear path through the smoke, meantime calling out names, true and taken. Boy, didn't they tell you that name is never to be spoken aloud in this room? Ha! From somewhere in the murk. So you've sneaked in again, where your face can't be seen. I have every right, sir. Boy, clear me a pathway to that infamous voice and we shall see. Gentlemen, there'll be pistol play soon enough by the looks of this new express here, just arrived from over Susquehanna, for there's no doubt about it now. The Paxton boys are on the move. Hurrah! Shame! How many, Jephthah? 'Tis Micah, 100, and picking up numbers by the hour, so it says here. Smokers pause and mid-puff. The communal vapours presently beginning to thin, human forms emerge in outline, some standing upon chairs and even tables, others seeking in literal consternation refuge beneath the furniture. The boys say they're coming for the Moravian Indians this time. Indians in Philadelphia? Dixon curiously. Mr. Chantry explains, converted by the Moravian Brethren years before the last French war, caught between the warring sides, distrusted by everyone, wishing only to live a Christian life, these Indians were peacefully settled up near the Lehigh when the Rangers there came after them, but a few weeks before the Conestoga murders, suspecting them of being in league with Pontiac, whose depredations were then at their full flood. Though some of these people were slain, yet most escaped, arriving at Philadelphia in November. About the time you boys did, in fact. Spite of the mob at Germantown, who nearly did for 'em. And now 140 souls, from Wyalusing and Wecatank and Nazareth, they're down in Province Island below the city, where the Moravians and Quakers tend to them, the army given its showing at Lancaster, being no longer trusted. The Paxtons'll kill us all, someone blubbers. Fuck 'em. They shan't have anyone here. Enough is enough. Our line had better be set no nearer than Schuylkill, and the ferries there brought back first thing. How many cannon have we in town? Mason and Dixon look at each other bleakly. Well, if I'd known 'twould be like this in America. In fact, when word arrived of the first Conestoga massacre, neither astronomer quite registered its full solemnity. The Cedar Street Observatory was up at last, Mr. Loxley and his lads were done shimming and cozening square members to circular purposes, and after 2 days of rain and snow, Mason and Dixon were taking their first obs from it. Mason did note as peculiar that the first mortal acts of savagery in America after their arrival should be committed by whites against Indians. Dixon muttered, "Why, 'tis the damned butterbags all over again." They saw white brutality enough at the Cape of Good Hope. They can no better understand it now than then. Something is eluding them. Whites in both places are become the very savages of their own worst dreams, far out of measure to any provocation. Mason and Dixon have consulted with all it seems to them they safely may. "Recall that there are 2 kinds of electricity," Dr. Franklin remarked, "positive and negative. Cape Town's curse is its weather, the electrical charge during the stormy season being everywhere positive, whilst in the dry season all is negative." "Are you certain?" Dixon mischievously. "'Tis not the other way round, that the rainy weather—" Yes, somewhat brusquely. "Whichever direction it goes, the relevant quantity here is the size of the swing between the two. That vertiginous repolarizing of the air, and perhaps the ether too, which may be affecting the very mentality of the people there." "Then what's America's excuse?" Dixon inquired, mild as country tea. "Unfortunately, young people," recalls the Reverend, "the word liberty, so unreflectively sacred to us today, was taken in those times to encompass even the darkest of men's rights, to injure whomever we might wish, unto extermination, were it possible, free of royal advice or proclamation lines and such. This being indeed, and alas, one of the liberties our late war was fought to secure." Bray, on her way out of the room for a moment, turns in the doorway, shocked. What a horrid thing to say! She does not remain to press the point. "At the time of Bushy Run," confides Ives Lespark, "and I have seen the very document, General Bouquet and General Gage both signed off on expenditures to replace hospital blankets used to convey the smallpox to the Indians, as they perhaps too clearly stipulated. To my knowledge," marvels Ives, "this had never been attempted on the part of any modern army till then." "Yes, Wicks?" Mr. Lespark, beaming at the Reverend. "You wish to add something? You may ever speak freely here, killing Indians having long ago ceased to figure as a sensitive topic in this house." "Since you put it that way," the Reverend in willed cheeriness, Firstly, everyone knew about the British infection of the Indians, and no one spoke out. The Paxton boys were but implementing this same wicked policy of extermination, using rifles instead. Although, secondly, unlike our own more virtuous day, no one back then was free from sin. Quakers, as handsomely as traders of less pacific faiths, profited from the sale of weapons to the Indians, including counterfeit brown besses that blew up in the faces of their purchasers. As often as felled any white settlers. Thirdly, how many more are there likely to be? Inquires his brother-in-law. Apparently I must reconsider my offer. Everyone got along, declares Uncle Wicks. Ye can't go looking for sinners, not in an occupied city, for everyone at one time or another was some kind of rogue. The preacher as the printer's devil, the mantua maker as the milkmaid, even little Peggy Shippen, God bless her, outrageous flirt even at 4 or 5, skipping in and out, handing each of us flowers whilst her father frowned one by one over our disbursements. Papa's work is making him sad, the miniature temptress explained to us. My work never makes me sad. What is your work, little girl? Asks your innocent uncle. To marry a general, she replies, sweeping back her hair, and die rich. During the occupation, having reached an even more dangerous age, she had her sights actually trained upon poor young Andre, till he had his hurricane and marched away, whereupon she sulked, though not without company, till Arnold matched in the little shilkle-side Cleopatra. Those of you who know your revolutionary history will understand all of that. Am I about to be shocked? Inquires Tenebrae, re-entering. Hope not, Depew blurts quietly. Well, Depew, you've made an impression, mutters Athelma. Didn't mean to, I'm sure. Tenebrae surveys the pair, unpromising. She sits and bends to a patch of chevron-stitched filling. Meanwhile, Mason and Dixon, a jangle through veins and reins with cafeous humours, impatient themselves to speak, are launched upon the choppy day, attending with what civility they may summon the often reckless monologues of others. The true war here is between the city and the back inhabitants. The true dying done by Irish, Scots, Indians, Catholics, far from Philadelphia, as from any ear that might have understood their final words. Yet it is the city selling rifles to anyone with the price, most egregiously the Indians who desire our dissolution. The rivalry is withal useful to the British, our common enemy, who thus gain the pretext for keeping troops forever upon our land. Whilst their damned proclamation line forbids to venture there those same back inhabitants who took Ohio at great suffering from the French, these damned British, with their list of offences growing daily, have much to answer for. Oh, I tremble that Britain should ever have to reckon with the base cowards who left Braddock to die, who will turn and flee at the stir of a feather, be it but upon some dead turkey cock. Oh, let us by no means offer offence to the scum of Hibernia, nor to the Jacobite refuse of Scotland, nor to any of this mongrel multiplicity of mud-dwellers, less civilized, indeed less human than the savages upon whom they intrude. Is he in here again? Someone, pray, kill him. Reason, reason. The Irish, sir, are schooled long and arduously in insurrection, knowing how to take a magazine or raid a convoy. Britain, though invoke she the tenderest feelings, has made it so. Thus does the lunch hour speed by. Soon there's a distinct feeling in the rooms of afternoon. Maps have been brought and spread, pigeons bearing messages dispatched from under roof peaks by expert Belgians resident here to as far away as Lancaster County. Boys old enough to handle a rifle are drilling out and back. Younger brothers are active in the next order of minitude with long sticks, whilst down at the next the dogs run obsessively to and fro, all round the edges, faces atwist with efforts to understand. Down the street, round the corner, into the city at large, the sailors grumble in their candleless ale hovels. The devout man of business looks ahead to an hour dedicated again to the daily question. The child trembles at the turn in the day when the ghosts shift about behind the doors, and out in the gust-beaten wilderness come the Paxton boys. Steadily on they ride, relaxed in poise, rifles athwart, the dreaded Paxton boys, with hunter's eyes and ancient wrongs a rankling. They soon come vis-a-vis with Mr. Franklin, whose gaze behind empurpled lenses hidden cannot be seen, and so may not be bidden. Talks, the siege of Philadelphia, or Attila turned anew. "'Tis too cloudy for obs tonight." Mason frets at the delay. As soon as they shall have taken measurements enough to yield trustworthy mean values of the zenith distances of Algol, Marfik, Capella, and their other latitude stars, allowing them at last to compute the exact latitude of the southernmost point of Philadelphia, they can pack up and go looking for the next observatory site, someplace in that same latitude to the west of here. "Can't be too soon for me," Mason mutters. They are returning to their rooms from the observatory. Tavern music and hoofbeats racket upon the brick, often for blocks. "I was hoping we'd yet be in town when those boys ride in," Dixon all but sighs. "Why? The worst sort of Celtic degenerates. Their ancestors ate human flesh, as their relatives continue to, no doubt. They've tasted blood. They'll shoot at anything, especially targets of bright colour which fail to blend enough with the environment. No, the best thing for this party to do is not dawdle, but simply get on with our work. Basically, get out of this place, and if possible, lose the red coat." Mason, reflect, as we must go west, into the forks of Brandywine, and as these barbarians of thine are advancing to the east, we are likely to meet them well before anyone in Philadelphia does. Mason frowns. "Yet, suppose we kept ever 15 miles to the south. Any roads we'd have to cross leading from the south, not down from Harris's Ferry. The main body then ought to pass by to the north of us. Unless they've rangers out, maybe even looking for us," wistfully. "Then you'd have your adventure after all, though why should they bother?" "Dunno. Happen we're particularly the intruders they can't abide. What must we look like? A sizable band of armed pioneers working for the proprietors, mystical machinery they've never seen, up far too late at night gazing at the heavens. Why, what would they think were it reversed? Mightn't someone explain to them? We'd have to draw within earshot first. If tales I hear of their rifles be true, why, those German gunsmiths out there know how to send a ball through a pretzel, any loop the fancy, from a mile away. You seem curiously merry at the prospect." merrily curious rather as to who commands them. Shall they really come against their mother city? Is this what America's going to be like? How, as a Quaker born, can I feel toward them any sentiments but those of grievous offence? Yet how, as a child of the 45, can my heart fail to break for the lives they've been obliged to live, and such inquiries along that line? They are just passing the door of the Restless Bee coffee house, one of those remaining active all night and as little able to resist the sounds of company as to pass nose-numb before the perfume of celebs. They enter the mid-watch disputancy. Now then, Mason's fizz presently wreathed in Delphic vapours. That's if you'll excuse me. Countermarching a bit. The 45? What would you possibly know, let alone remember, pray, of that fateful year? You were a child, out there in a pit cabin, with naught but spoil heaps to look at. Missing it all was the tale you told me, lad. Ah, the blithe piping of youth, ever claiming a part in history. I love it. Somehow another fervent cup is in his hand, from which he sips at length before singing, "When night was day, and day was night, who then was the Jacobite?" Eh? Of course you were far, far too young to appreciate those grand days of 45 and 6, all too electrical with passion. The Mason, a Jacobite? Anyone who was 17 that summer, young Dixon, was a Jacobite. Dixon does recall a band of riders, cloaked and masked, who clamoured into Raby in the middle of the night. I was watching from a pantry window down at fetlock level, boots, the hems of cloaks, tartan patterns flashing everywhere, though the colours in that light were uncertain. Even now I believe that it was he. I could feel something of such moment, such high purpose. I knelt, transfixed. I would have done whatever he bade me. 'Twas the only time in my life I have felt that surrender to power, upon which, as I have learned after, to my sorrow, all government is founded. Never again. No more a maiden as to that, and thank ye all the same. How so? He and his forces came and went upon quite the other side of England, the Irish side, most convenient to French transport. And yet could our wishes have brought him? Well, our wishes. However little I have to expect from my own, yet am I not grown quite so melancholic as to in any way question those of others. Thoughtful of thee, Mason. 'Twas ever sunrise, Dixon, in those times. I recall less well the nights, each morning bringing us in fresh news, sightings of him everywhere. We chose to loiter near the houses with pine trees by him, such being a coded welcome to any Jacobite on the run, as a sign of food and shelter within. In Durham, sometimes when the wind was fair, we could hear the bagpipes far away. We had never heard music like it before. Some lads, aye, and lasses, would travel miles to hear it. I didn't much fancy it, sad to say, much too predatory, less accountable for how it sounded, less human, the ever-inflated bag allowing the player to decouple song from breath. It never paused for breath. Can you imagine how unsettling that may have been? Not as a wild creature in the night, for every beast must roar, yet draw breath, whilst this comes swelling, invisible, resistless, something that has passed beyond the need for breath. I remember 'twas how Wolfe's men came into Stroud, without bagpipes at the van, playing that music forbidden to all other Scots to play since 1745, and thereby doubly damned, a chaunting and a keening all their loss, failure, hatred, may I say, of England, frightening village after village into submission. The Brits would never have prevailed in India. In their spoliation of Scotland, they had learned the power of that cry that never breathes, the direct appeal to animal terror, and converted it to their uses, leaving loincloths besmeared all up and down the tropical world. And here were they, as those for whom they marched, doing the same to the vale of my birth and blood. The clothiers had made of children my age red Indians, spying upon them from the woodlands they thought were theirs. We called them the white people, and the house they lived in, the big house. Splendid boyhood, you might say, but you'd be wrong. What I had imagined a paradise proving instead but the brightly illustrated front of the arras, behind which all manner of fools lay bleeding, and real rats swarmed, their tails undulating, waiting their moment. I discovered the rulers who do not live in castles, but in housing less distinct, often unable to remain past earshot of the engines they own and draw their power from. Imagine you're out late on a spring night, riding along with your sweetheart, an evening trembling with promise, all the night an Eden. Should we be discussing this? Yes, because all at once one has blundered, sheep-eyed, upon yet one more bloody mill, a river turned into a race, the works lit up in the dark like a great hostelry full of ill-humoured elves, any chances for a few sentimental hours nipped as ever in Gloucestershire, as soon as they may arise. You, simple Geordie, inhabit a part of England where ancient creatures may yet move in the dusk, and the animals fly, and the dead pop in now and then for coffee and a chat. Upon my home soil, the ground for growing any such wonders has been cruelly poisoned with the coming of the hydraulic looms and the appearance of new sorts of wealthy individual, the late-come rulers upon whom as a younger person I spied, silent, whilst holding savage feelings within. I was expelled from paradise by Wolfe and his regiment. One penetration and no withdrawal could ever have meaning. My home's no more. Does Dixon catch an incompletely suppressed lilt of insincerity? Something's askew. Thou are in exile, then? With London but the first station, then came the Cape, then St. Helena, now these provinces. You were there, and are here. You must have seen it, each time another step further. Away from... Perhaps not away, Dixon. No, perhaps toward. Hadn't considered that, hey? Optimism? Exercise your boobyish casuistry upon that. Why don't you? Toward what? Aye, the booby. Aye, when indeed... But how much further upfield can he bring that, before a brush from one of Rebecca's potent wings? Toward what, then? Yet in the tone of a fop to a bedlamite, concealing the demand, amuse me.